Shabbat Shalom, blessed Shabbat to the house of Yahuwah, to all the nations of the world, to everyone who is called by his name. I just wanted to share about a dream that I had last night. And this one is mostly for the sisters. Although brothers, it's good for you to know this too and to share with the sisters if you're hearing this message. I had this dream, and in this dream, there were some women and they were excited about getting a new hairstyle. You know, that's the way right now, women going to the beauty salons and getting a new hairstyle. And there was this woman who wanted to get her hair made up. And based on what I recollect from the dream, it was also using a weave to get the look that she wanted to have. You know, it was kind of like a throwback hairstyle, more like a 60s type hairstyle. So it was something that framed the face. And then it just had this flip at the back. It was flipped up at the back in a curl, right? And it was very, very sleek, very shiny, very neat. And it framed her face. And she felt like a queen after getting that hairstyle. So much so that when she went to the event that she was getting all dolled up for, that there was somebody taking a video of her lovely hairstyle. And so there's this camera getting a view from the top, from the side, from all angles. It was like she was like the center of attention, right? And then bam, what do you see in her ear? A hexagram earring, right? It was a hexagram. It was silver. It was glittery. It was very big and bold, complementing her awesome hairstyle. Now, this is viewing from the eyes of the world, right? This is viewing from the eyes of the world. They see this as a standard of beauty. This awesome, sleek, shiny, well put together hairstyle and this beautiful, bold hexagram earring. And you could see her face beaming, radiating with joy. She felt like she was all that. She felt like she was all that. Now, at the same time, there was this woman who wore her head in a wrap, right? And in this dream, I was there in this dream, and I kind of like did a self-check because she made kind of like an oblique reference to women who don't take care of their hair. And mine was wrapped, so she couldn't even see my hair, you know. But it influenced another woman, and she had converted from Islam to being a believer in our Messiah, Yahushua. She had converted, right? And she was married in this dream. She's a married woman. But she went home after seeing that woman in her quote unquote glory. She went home and she started attacking her husband. And she told her husband, in essence, that she would stop. She would no longer be wearing this head wrap, you know. And it was a pink wrap, and she threw it in the garbage. And then it's almost like a spirit came over her, and she just started rebelling against her husband. They started arguing about a phone. He was supposed to give her a new phone. And a whole series of things started happening in your household. And I said, man, I was an onlooker. And I went to her and I said, let me give you a hug, sister. And I told her, I said, I know this is not you. And we started talking and she started crying and I started comforting her. You know, I started comforting her. She was a mess. She was a royal mess after being influenced by that image of that woman. Okay? And that's where my dream stopped. So I just felt compelled that I needed to share this message because some people think that, you know, the cosmetics, the hairstyle, even the weave, the jewelry, they're not an issue. But look at the spirit that took over not just this woman, but invaded her household and made a mess in her marriage, right? And there are some scriptures that go along with this. I think that it's very important for us to reflect on those scriptures, to reflect on what Yahuwah's word says, to know that, look, this dream is not just an arbitrary dream. Look, Yahuwah is calling us out of the ways of the world, right? He's calling us out of the ways of the world. And some of us, we're not compelled about these things. We're not convicted by the word. Some people say, well, those things, they're physical. They're just external. What Yahuwah cares about is the heart. Yes, he cares about the heart. But Yahushua he says, don't just clean the outside of the cup. He says, clean the inside of the cup also. He didn't say, don't bother cleaning the outside of the cup, right? So he is concerned about both. So I wanted to share this message with you, and here are the scriptures that go along with this message. Sisters and brothers who can take this message also to sisters. Let's hear what the word of Yahuwah says. Now, ironically, earlier this week, I had a conversation with a sister by WhatsApp. It was a chat. And I shared this scripture with her because she sent me a link to an entrepreneur who has a jewelry house, and she wanted us to promote this jewelry house. And I said, I'm going to opt out of that. And I shared with her this text. 1 Peter 3, starting at verse 1, it says, in the same way, wives, be subject to your own husbands, so that if any are disobedient to the word, they, without a word, might be won by the behavior of their wives, having seen your blameless behavior in fear. Your adornment should not be outward, arranging the hair, wearing gold, or putting on dresses, but a hidden man of the heart. So now remember, in my dream, after this woman got influenced by the spirit, she went home and she rebelled against her husband. There was chaos in her household. So this is not just an arbitrary thing that happened. There's a correlation. And for some people, it may not be as obvious as in this case in my dream. It might be a subtle way of rebelling against the husband, or not being under the husband's authority, not being submissive to the husband, right? The scripture goes on to say that Sarah obeyed her husband, calling him master, of whom you became children, doing good, and are not frightened by any fear. Now let's hear what the word of Yahuwah has to say in 1 Corinthians 11. And this is a scripture that some may interpret very differently, but this scripture is very essential. It starts out by admonishing, become imitators of me as I also am of Messiah. And I praise you, brothers, that you remember me in every way and keep the traditions as I deliver them unto you. So remember, traditions here is not the traditions of men. They are the scriptural principles upon which we found our practices or everyday life or way of life, right? And I wish you to know that the head of every man is Messiah, and the head of every woman is the man, and the head of Messiah is Elohim. So let's move on to verse 5. It says that every woman praying or prophesying with her head uncovered brings shame to her head, for that is one and the same as if her head were shaved. For if a woman is not covered, let her also be shorn. But if it is a shame for a woman to be shorn or shaved, let her be covered. So we know that in our culture, right? Most women, you're not going to be walking about with shaved heads. That's not the norm, right? So that's not the norm. Then that means that the converse should be true. Let her be covered. For a man indeed should not cover his head, since he is the likeness and esteem of Elohim, but woman is the esteem of man. For man is not from the woman, but woman from man. For man also was not created for the woman, but woman for man. Because of this, the woman ought to have authority on her head because of the messengers. Right? So again, this reiterates the order of Yahuwah. Woman is from man. Man is not from woman. Numbers 5, starting from verse 11. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the children of Yasharal and say to them, When any man's wife turns aside and has committed a trespass against him, and a man has intercourse with her, and it is hidden from the eyes of her husband, and it is concealed that she has defiled herself, and there was no witness against her, nor was she caught, and the spirit of jealousy comes upon him, and he becomes jealous of his wife who has defiled herself, or a spirit of jealousy comes upon him, and he becomes jealous of his wife, although she has not defiled herself, then the man shall bring his wife to the priest, and he shall bring the offering for her, 1/10 of an ephah of barley of flour. He is not to pour oil on it or put frankincense on it, because it is a grain offering of jealousy, an offering for remembering, for bringing crookedness to remembrance. And the priest shall bring her near, and shall make her stand before Yahuwah. And the priest shall take set apart water in an earthen vessel, and take some of the dust that is on the floor of the dwelling place, and put it into water. And the priest shall make the woman stand before Yahuwah, and shall uncover the woman's head, and put the offering for remembrance in her hands, which is the grain offering of jealousy, while the priest holds in his hand the bitter water that brings a curse. And the priest shall make her swear, and say to the woman, If no man has lain with you, and if you have not turned aside to uncleanness under your husband's authority, be free from this bitter water that causes a curse. So we see here that the woman then would have had to have her head covered, right? Because it says then the woman's head is uncovered. So this demonstrates that this was a norm for the women of Yahuwah who were living under the Torah and in accordance with Yahuwah's way and Yahuwah's commands. And so if we take this seriously, because the Torah is the way of life, right? And Yahushua says that on two commands hang all the laws and the prophets: love for Yahuwah and love for neighbor. And so if we love Yahuwah, if we respect his authority, and we love our partners or spouses, and we respect their authority, then of course we follow the order that Yahuwah established from the very beginning, and we do not deviate from that order as long as we're living in love for Yahuwah and love for one another. So the final admonition I have for you comes from Romans 12, starting from verse 1. It says, I call upon you, therefore, brothers, through the compassion of Elohim, to present your bodies a living offering, set apart, well-pleasing to Elohim, your reasonable worship. Verse 2, and do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you prove what is the good and well-pleasing and perfect desire of Elohim. Did you hear that? Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Now, how can we enter into the reign of the kingdom? How can we enter into life by not honoring the authority of the Most High YAH? How can we enter into the reign of Yahuwah if we do not respect his authority, if we do not obey his word, if we are not transformed by his word? You know, there are only two pathways in life. There's a pathway to life and there's a pathway to death. There are only two resurrections. The first resurrection, which is the resurrection of the righteous, and the second resurrection, which is the resurrection of the condemned. We need to choose who we will serve. Romans 12 talks about presenting our bodies a living sacrifice to Yahuwah. This is our form of worship. This is our form of worship. So some people might disregard this word and maybe even want to trivialize it, but know that this is a salvation issue, because I cannot enter into the reign of Yahuwah by not being transformed by his word, by not seeking what is his good and perfect will. And it may not be in this issue, it may be in some other issue, right? That we are falling short. This is just one way, one thing that Yahuwah is showing this day. But, as we continue to reflect and to seek him, then we also need to look at all areas and all aspects of our lives, not just the external, but also the internal, and to present our bodies a living sacrifice, which is our reasonable worship. So as we worship him on this Shabbat, as we worship him on this set apart day, let us examine ourselves. Shabbat Shalom and have a blessed one.